8 magnesium deficiency signs that affect your memory. Most people believe that memory problems only begin when we get older, and that there is nothing we can do to slow them down. But what if one of the most common contributors to foggy thinking, forgetfulness, and mental fatigue has almost nothing to do with age, and everything to do with a mineral that many adults are quietly running low on without ever realizing it? This video is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose any condition or replace advice from a qualified healthcare professional. If you are experiencing memory changes or any other symptoms discussed in this video, it is always a good idea to speak with a doctor who can properly evaluate your individual situation. Magnesium is involved in hundreds of processes throughout the body, and several of those processes take place directly inside brain cells, in the exact regions where memories are formed, stored, and later recalled. And yet, magnesium deficiency is often overlooked because its early warning signs rarely resemble a memory problem at first glance. They look like ordinary tiredness, they look like everyday stress, they look like simply getting older. Stay with us until the end of this video, because one of the 8 signs we are about to cover is so frequently mistaken for a completely unrelated condition that many people live with it for years before anyone ever connects it back to magnesium. Before we walk through the signs themselves, it helps to understand why this particular mineral matters so much for the way we think, focus, and remember. Magnesium plays a role in regulating the electrical signals that pass between brain cells, helping to keep that communication balanced and efficient. When magnesium levels drop, this signaling can become less steady, and some researchers believe this may be part of the reason people with lower magnesium sometimes describe feeling mentally slower, less sharp, or simply not quite like themselves. Magnesium is also involved in a receptor in the brain that helps regulate how neurons respond to stimulation, and an imbalance here has been of interest to scientists studying both memory and mood. It also helps to understand, even briefly, why so many adults end up with lower magnesium levels in the first place without ever intending to. Modern diets that lean heavily on processed and refined foods tend to strip away much of the magnesium that whole foods naturally contain, since refining grains and processing vegetables often removes the very parts of the plant where magnesium is concentrated. On top of that, certain common habits and conditions can quietly deplete magnesium over time, including high stress levels, regular alcohol consumption, certain medications, and digestive issues that make it harder for the body to absorb nutrients properly from food. None of this is meant to alarm you. It is simply meant to explain why magnesium deficiency is far more common in everyday life than most people assume, and why it deserves a closer look rather than being dismissed as a rare or unusual concern. With that foundation in place, let us walk through 8 signs that may be worth paying closer attention to, especially if several of them sound familiar at once. Number 1 is difficulty concentrating and frequent mental fog. The first sign is one of the most common and also one of the easiest to brush aside. Mental fog is that frustrating sensation of trying to focus on a task, a conversation, or even a single sentence, and feeling like your thoughts are moving through static. Some people describe it as staring at a screen and reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing a single word of it. Others describe it as a kind of mental heaviness, as though every thought takes just a little more effort than it used to. Magnesium is involved in supporting healthy nerve function throughout the body, including within the brain itself, and some research suggests that lower levels may be associated with reduced mental clarity in certain individuals. This does not mean that everyone who feels foggy on occasion has a magnesium deficiency, and it certainly is not the only possible explanation. Stress, poor sleep, dehydration, and even certain medications can all produce very similar symptoms. Still, magnesium status may be one contributing factor worth discussing with a healthcare provider, particularly if the fog seems to appear regularly rather than only during especially demanding weeks. Consider Linda, a 61-year-old retired school teacher who spent decades keeping track of lesson plans, student names, and classroom schedules without any real difficulty. After retiring, she began noticing something strange. She would walk into a room and completely forget why she had gone there in the first place, sometimes standing in her own kitchen for a full minute trying to piece together her original intention. At first, she assumed this was simply part of getting older, something to accept quietly and move past. It was only after mentioning the pattern to her physician during a routine appointment that magnesium came up as one of several factors worth evaluating alongside her diet, her sleep habits, and her overall health. Linda's experience is a useful reminder that mental fog is not something we should automatically accept as an unavoidable part of aging, even though it is undeniably common, and even though many people quietly assume there is nothing to be done about it. What makes this sign particularly tricky is that it tends to develop so gradually that people rarely notice the shift happening in real time. A person does not usually wake up one morning feeling foggy. Instead, the fog settles in slowly, over weeks or even months, until one day someone looks back and realizes they have not felt truly sharp in quite some time. That gradual onset is part of why this sign so often gets attributed to stress, busyness, or simply having too much going on, when in some cases there may be more beneath the surface worth exploring with a professional. Number 2, increased forgetfulness with everyday tasks. The second sign moves a step further than general fog into something more specific, which is forgetting small, familiar tasks that used to happen almost automatically. This might look like forgetting to turn off the stove after cooking, misplacing keys far more often than usual, or blanking on the name of a coworker you have known for years. Everyone forgets things from time to time, and an occasional lapse is completely normal and not by itself a cause for concern. However, when forgetfulness becomes a noticeable and repeating pattern rather than an isolated slip here and there, it may be worth exploring the possible contributing factors. And magnesium status is sometimes one of the elements a healthcare provider will consider. Magnesium supports the communication pathways involved in forming short-term memories, helping neurons strengthen the connections that allow new information to be retained rather than lost almost as soon as it arrives. Some studies have explored a possible relationship between magnesium levels and memory performance in adults, although researchers are careful to note that memory is influenced by a wide web of factors working together rather than any single nutrient in isolation. It is important to emphasize that forgetfulness has many possible causes, ranging from everyday stress and sleep deprivation to various underlying health conditions that would need proper medical evaluation. This particular sign should never be interpreted on its own as confirmation of a deficiency. Instead, think of it as one piece of a much larger picture, one that a healthcare professional is best equipped to help you evaluate alongside your full history and current lifestyle. Number 3, persistent fatigue that sleep does not fix. The third sign is a type of exhaustion that feels distinctly different from ordinary tiredness. This is the kind of fatigue where a full 8 hours of sleep still leaves you feeling like you never rested at all, as though your body went through the motions of sleeping without actually recovering. Magnesium plays a role in energy production at the cellular level, helping the body convert the food we eat into usable energy that powers everything from muscle movement to brain function. When magnesium is low, some people report feeling persistently drained, both physically and mentally, in a way that does not seem to respond to extra rest or caffeine the way ordinary tiredness might. This kind of fatigue and memory difficulty are closely connected, because a tired brain simply does not process and store new information nearly as efficiently as a well-rested one does. Think of the brain like a filing system that needs a certain amount of quiet time to sort through the day's events and decide what gets stored long-term. When that system is running on empty, filing gets sloppy, and things that should have been remembered clearly end up misplaced or lost entirely. Robert, a 48-year-old truck driver, mentioned to his doctor that no matter how many hours he slept, he still felt like he was moving through his day in slow motion. He had also started forgetting details about his delivery routes that he used to know by heart after years on the job, which worried him enough to bring it up during his annual checkup. His doctor considered several possibilities as part of a broader evaluation, including his magnesium levels alongside his sleep quality and overall diet. Stories like Robert's highlight why persistent, unrelenting fatigue should never simply be pushed through or ignored, since it may be pointing toward something worth investigating. It is worth noting that fatigue of this kind is often the very first sign people notice, long before they think to connect it with their memory at all. Someone might spend months or even years assuming they simply need more sleep, more coffee, or more willpower, without realizing that the underlying cause might not respond to any of those solutions no matter how consistently they are applied. Number 4, muscle cramps, twitches, and restlessness. The fourth sign might seem completely unrelated to memory at first glance, but it often appears alongside the very same underlying imbalance. Magnesium plays an important role in muscle relaxation, working almost like a counterbalance to calcium, which tends to trigger muscle contraction. When magnesium levels are low, some individuals experience cramps, sudden twitches, or a restless, hard-to-describe sensation, particularly in the legs at night just as they are trying to fall asleep. This restlessness can interfere significantly with the depth and quality of sleep. And since deep sleep is precisely when the brain does much of its work consolidating the day's memories into longer-term storage, poor sleep quality caused by muscle discomfort may indirectly contribute to memory difficulties down the line. In other words, the connection between muscle symptoms and memory may not be a direct one, but it may run indirectly through the disruption of restorative deep sleep. If you have noticed that your legs twitch or cramp frequently at night, and you also feel mentally foggy or forgetful during the day, it could be worth mentioning both symptoms together to a healthcare professional, since looking at the full picture often reveals connections that looking at a single symptom in isolation would miss entirely. Patients often describe these two symptoms as completely separate concerns, one physical and one mental, without ever considering that they might share a common root cause worth investigating together. Number 5, heightened anxiety and irritability. The fifth sign involves mood rather than memory directly, but the two are far more connected than many people realize. Magnesium is thought to play a role in regulating the body's stress response, including the balance of certain calming neurotransmitters in the brain that help keep our emotional reactions proportionate to what is actually happening around us. When magnesium is low, some people report feeling more anxious, irritable, or emotionally on edge than usual, often reacting more strongly to small frustrations than they normally would. Chronic stress and anxiety are known to affect the brain's ability to focus and retain information, partly because a stressed nervous system tends to prioritize short-term survival responses over the slower, more deliberate work of forming long-term memories. This creates a situation where anxiety and forgetfulness can feed into each other, each one potentially making the other feel more intense, in a cycle that can be genuinely difficult to break without understanding what is driving it. Margaret, a 55-year-old office manager, described feeling unusually snappy with her coworkers and family members over small things that never used to bother her, while also noticing that she was forgetting important details during work meetings that she normally would have remembered without any effort. When her doctor looked into possible contributing factors during her visit, magnesium intake was one of several areas discussed alongside her overall stress levels and sleep patterns. Margaret's situation illustrates how mood symptoms and memory symptoms often arrive together rather than showing up in isolation, which is exactly why a thorough evaluation matters so much. Many people also describe feeling a kind of restlessness in their thinking alongside the irritability, as though their mind cannot quite settle on one thing long enough to fully process it, which can make both memory and mood symptoms feel more intertwined than they might expect going into the conversation with their doctor. Number 6, frequent headaches or migraines. The sixth sign is something many people experience regularly without ever connecting it to magnesium at all. Magnesium is involved in regulating blood vessel function and nerve signaling, both of which play a meaningful role in how headaches and migraines develop and progress. Some research has explored magnesium's potential relationship with migraine frequency and intensity. And while it is certainly not a guaranteed cause or a guaranteed cure for everyone, it remains an area that continues to interest both researchers and healthcare providers. Headaches, especially when they occur frequently, can also interfere with concentration and memory simply because it becomes genuinely difficult to think clearly while dealing with head pain that demands so much of your attention. If migraines or frequent headaches are part of your experience alongside memory concerns, it may be worth mentioning magnesium as one of several factors your healthcare provider considers during an evaluation, alongside other more common and well-established causes such as dehydration, muscle tension, poor sleep, or other underlying medical conditions that deserve their own careful assessment. Number 7, numbness, tingling, or unusual sensations. The seventh sign is less commonly discussed in everyday conversation, but it can be an important clue when it appears alongside other symptoms on this list. Magnesium plays a role in normal nerve signaling throughout the entire body, and when levels become significantly low, some individuals report unusual sensations such as tingling, numbness, or a pins and needles feeling, often noticed first in the hands or feet. These sensations are certainly not exclusive to magnesium deficiency and can be caused by many other conditions, some of which are far more common, so they should always be evaluated properly by a professional rather than assumed to have any single cause. However, when unusual nerve sensations occur alongside memory difficulties, persistent fatigue, and mood changes, it may suggest that something systemic is affecting the nervous system as a whole, and magnesium status could be one of the factors worth investigating as part of a complete picture. This is precisely the kind of sign we mentioned earlier in this video, the one so often mistaken for a completely different issue. For many people, tingling sensations get quietly dismissed as simply sitting the wrong way, poor circulation, or nothing more than a passing oddity, when in some cases they may actually be part of a broader pattern connected to nutrient levels that deserves a second look rather than being written off entirely. Number 8, confusion or difficulty with complex thinking. The eighth and final sign tends to be the most noticeable of them all, because it moves beyond simple forgetfulness into a broader difficulty with processing complex information as a whole. This can include struggling to follow a conversation that has several steps or moving parts, having trouble making decisions that used to feel simple and almost automatic, or feeling mentally overwhelmed by tasks that require organizing several pieces of information at the same time, such as planning a trip or managing household finances. In more significant cases of magnesium deficiency, some medical literature has described confusion as a possible associated symptom, particularly when deficiency is severe and occurs alongside other imbalances in the body. It is important to emphasize, clearly and directly, that confusion has many potential causes, some of which require urgent medical attention and should never be self-diagnosed or quietly ignored. If you or someone you know experiences sudden or severe confusion, it is important to seek medical evaluation promptly, since this could indicate a range of conditions that genuinely need proper assessment by a qualified healthcare professional rather than an internet search or a video like this one. Harold, a 72-year-old retired accountant, had spent his entire career comfortable with numbers, budgets, and detailed spreadsheets. His family noticed that he had started struggling with tasks that once came effortlessly, such as balancing his checkbook or following the plot of a television show that had more than one storyline. His daughter, concerned by the change, encouraged him to see his doctor rather than assume it was simply a normal part of getting older. During that visit, several factors were reviewed together, including his overall nutrition and magnesium intake, alongside other more common causes of cognitive change that needed to be ruled out first. Harold's story is a reminder that noticing a change and seeking guidance early is almost always more helpful than waiting and hoping the pattern resolves on its own. Looking at all 8 of these signs together, a pattern begins to emerge that is easy to miss when each symptom is considered entirely on its own. Mental fog, forgetfulness, persistent fatigue, muscle symptoms, mood changes, headaches, unusual nerve sensations, and difficulty with complex thinking can all overlap with one another, sometimes reinforcing each other in ways that make the full picture harder to see. No single sign on this list is enough to confirm a magnesium deficiency by itself, and many of these symptoms have other possible explanations that only a healthcare provider is truly positioned to evaluate properly. What makes magnesium worth discussing at all is that some research has estimated a meaningful portion of adults in certain populations may not consistently meet recommended magnesium intake levels through diet alone, which suggests this is a far more widespread consideration than most people realize, even among those who otherwise consider themselves to be eating reasonably well. It is also worth mentioning that certain groups may be more likely to experience lower magnesium levels than others, including older adults, people with certain digestive conditions that affect nutrient absorption, and individuals who consume high amounts of processed foods with relatively little in the way of leafy greens, nuts, seeds, or whole grains. None of this means that everyone in these groups will experience the signs discussed in this video, but it does mean that awareness matters, especially when combined with an open and honest conversation with a healthcare provider who knows your full medical history. If any of these 8 signs sounded familiar while watching this video, the most helpful next step is not to self-diagnose or begin taking supplements without guidance, but rather to have an open and honest conversation with a healthcare professional who can review your symptoms, your current diet, and if appropriate, order relevant testing to get a clearer picture. Magnesium-rich foods such as leafy green vegetables, almonds and other nuts, pumpkin seeds, and whole grains can be a reasonable part of a balanced diet for most people. However, any decisions about supplementation, dosage, or treatment are best made in partnership with a qualified provider who understands your complete health picture, including any medications you may be taking or other conditions you may have. To bring everything together, remember that one of the most frequently cited points in discussions about magnesium is that a significant portion of adults may not be getting enough of this mineral through diet alone, a statistic that helps explain why these 8 signs are so widespread, and yet so often overlooked or misattributed to something else entirely. Memory, mood, energy, and nerve function are all deeply connected, and magnesium sits quietly at the intersection of many of these systems, which is exactly why paying attention to these signs as a group, rather than individually, can make such a meaningful difference. It is easy to watch a video like this one and feel a flicker of worry about every ache, every forgotten name, and every restless night, but that is not the intention here. The goal is simply awareness, not alarm. Most people experience some of these signs occasionally without anything being seriously wrong, and the human body is remarkably good at recovering once an underlying imbalance is identified and addressed properly. What matters most is paying attention to patterns rather than isolated moments, and feeling empowered to bring those patterns to a healthcare professional rather than quietly worrying about them alone or assuming nothing can be done. Small, consistent changes, guided by proper medical advice, can often make a meaningful difference over time, and that is a far more hopeful takeaway than simply feeling burdened by a list of symptoms. We would genuinely love to hear from you. Have you noticed any of these 8 signs in yourself or in someone you care about, and did anything on this list surprise you more than you expected? Let us know in the comments below, because your experiences might help someone else watching this video feel a little less alone in what they are going through right now. If you found this video helpful, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who might benefit from this information, and consider subscribing for more videos that break down the connection between everyday nutrition and the way our minds and bodies function together.